Diane, the Creative Inkster. Today is Tuesday, August the 9th, and we are here to make a fun fold card for Technique Tuesday. Here is the card that started it all, gave me the inspiration. It was made for me as a swap card from my team member, Marilyn Rosenberger, a very long time ago, back in the spring, and I've been thinking about doing it, and I thought, oh, this week is the perfect week to do it. So isn't that fun? So we're going to do it a little bit differently, but you get the idea of this fun fold. So you're going to definitely need a bone folder and a piece of white cardstock, which basic white cardstock is as thick as our regular cardstocks. You need it for the stability to stand up, but you're going to need to do a lot of burnishing with your bone folder. So have that at the handy. If you're watching live, please let me know you're here. It's always good to interact. And I do go back and read the comments, so I'd love to know if you watch the replay. So I'll stick Marilyn's card to the side. Here is the one I made that we're going to duplicate. And what I'm going to show you is how to cut this paper so that the pattern continues to run exactly the same way. So you'll see that it should be this piece that's up at the top. It's not too super noticeable, but I want to show you how I was able to kind of figure that out after the fact. Alrighty, let's get started on this. So what we need is a standard card base, which is 5.5 by 8.5 for this orientation. Let's tuck those away. And we're going to do some scoring. So let me just show you with this open and my ruler what we're going to be doing. Sometimes easier. So where the fold is on the inside, hi Vicki, where the fold is, it's a simple measurement because we're going to do the same measurement all over the place. So from the left inside at the fold, we're going to put a pencil mark at 1 7/8, and from the outside at 1 7/8 as well. I tried it at 1 3/4. That was a little off, so I thought it'd be better to do that. And then exactly the same thing from this center score line to the left at 1 7/8 and to the right at 1 7/8 on both sides. So 1 7/8, that is your measurement. You're going to need your paper trimmer eventually, but we'll need pencil and a ruler. All right, I'm going to leave that open so I can watch what I'm doing. Oh, I didn't put my score line on this yet. Okay, so I like to score my paper rather than folding it half and using a bone folder. I like to actually score my cardstock, and I usually do it on my Simply Scored tool because I'll score one full sheet and then cut it in half, and I have the two scored at the same time rather than taking the time to do them separately. A little time-saving tip. So there's my center score line, and I'm just going to kind of line it up on the black line across my scratch grid paper here so you can have a visual for that. So from the left side and in along that score line, I'm going to put a little pencil mark, and make sure it's a pencil mark you can erase. Don't necessarily want to use a pen. So put a little pencil mark there, and from the left side going in at 1 7/8 again. So I'm going to double check that. Always easier when you're doing this with your ruler. All right, and then I'm going to turn it this way. Hi Brenda. So now my score line in the center is vertical, and it's lining up with my grid paper darker darker line. And that's just so you can see it better. From the score line to the right, I'm going to put a little tick mark at 1 7/8, and from the left, from the score line out to the left, 1 7/8. This is all on the inside. Flip it 180 degrees. So again, our center score line is vertical. Do the same thing. 1 7/8 to the right, and 1 7/8 to the left. So I just lined my 1 7/8 up on the score line and a little pencil mark. Now you could triangulate this by drawing the lines. I'm not going to do that because that's a lot more to erase. but I can see my score lines, and what I want to do is get the score line from my either a simply scored or a paper trimmer from point to point and down, and point to the center and down. Okay, so you just pull your paper trimmer in. So there's my horizontal score line. There's my 1 7/8 on either side of it. I'm going to go from that pencil mark to the center one, and from the center one to the one that's 1 7/8 inch below the score line. So you just line those up on your paper trimmer. Now the best way I found to do this was to get the one that is on the center score line in my sights, right in the center of my paper trimmer track, because you can't really see where it's landing, right? So then I just come down to it. I don't want to go over it. I'm just going to take a peek. I don't want to go too far over it. So I've burnished it from there to there. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm going to get that center line pencil mark in my sights down this track, line up the other one, and score down. Oops, I think I slid a little bit. Oh no, not too bad. There we go. And then what I have, if I can show you with the right light, nope, that doesn't help. I have, oh, I think you might be able to see that once it focuses. Focus. Stop moving. Give it a second to focus. There we go. I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. So I have the mark in the center line. I'm going to place that in my paper trimmer. Ooh, that lined up fairly nicely. And then the other point at the top end. And then flip it a little bit so that I get that center mark in the track again, and the other mark to the end. All right, so now we have these triangles plus our center line. That's what we're going for. So normally we fold away from the divot when we make a score line. We're not going to do that this time. Now it's a little tricky to fold in because you're folding it. Here's the sample. These ones are going to come in, but you don't have a straight on edge that's going to fold entirely over. It's just a little tricky. That's all. So let's start with the center score line. Let's get that one nicely burnished. And I purposefully waited until I had all my little pencil marks, just so that it wasn't changing and readjusting it. All right, so now what we want is for this triangle piece to come in. So we are going to fold up the top one. I'm just going to score it a little, fold up the bottom one. It's a little, like I said, it's a little tricky. You see how it's coming together there? So I'm folding this piece in. So if I actually hold my finger along the center line where my pencil mark is, I can get this to fold in a little. Flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Put my finger where the pencil mark is and fold this in a little bit. Gives it a little bit of a guide. So let's try that on the other side. Let's see, we're going to hold here on the left and fold in. And then we're going to flip it over and hold on the right and fold in. Oh yeah, this has got to come up. Come on. I'm not feeling like I'm not doing a great job describing this. So now your pieces, once you've given them a little fold, will start to come in as they should, and you get sort of what looks like a house. To me, that's what it reminds me of. There's our pieces folded inside. I bet if you did this with plain white cardstock, which is not as thick, it might go a little better, but it needs that stability once it's folded. So once you've got the folds in, you can go back through between the two folds and burnish, flip it over and do the same thing again. I found that it just needs working with it. You want it stable enough that it'll stand up nicely, but it's got to be able to open and close. So now would be a good time to go back in and erase any pencil marks. Now I'm going to just double check that my eraser doesn't have anything. I had some ink or something on the end of it before. It was leaving little black marks. Mine are so small I honestly can't see them. But if they're there and they bother you, go in and get rid of them. There we go. Okay, so there's our piece, there's our base for the card, just like this. So now let's work with the cards, the pattern paper that's going on the inside. So I suggested you go with a piece that's 5 1/4, that's our standard wide, by 8. And the reason for that was so that when you cut it in half, like this, when you cut it in half, your pattern paper that is indirectional will continue to flow. So I'm going to cut it in half at 4, but I'm going to keep the top and the bottom portions separate. Okay, so I've cut it up in half, but if I sort of line it up, that's where they meet. What we're going to do is trim this down and this down so that it fits, but I know I want to keep the two pieces separate. So even though this is smaller, you do the same measurement of 1 7/8. Just going to double check that. Yeah. So at the top, so this is the way the two pieces were when they were together. This is going to go on the top. This is going to go on the bottom. So you measure over 1 7/8. We're going to cut this one instead of folding it though. And then from the left, you're going to go 1 7/8 again. Get this so I can see it. 1 7/8. And then down from the top, 1 7/8. And the same on the other side. So left and right sides, 1 7/8. Now we're going to cut it between those marks. So here's the top. There's our little pencil mark. And then we're going to line it up with the 1 7/8 down on the right. So line those up in your trimmer track. And this time we're going to cut. And that cuts off a little angle, which, as you can see, should start to make it fit in there. So once again, from the pencil mark along the top to the pencil mark down, cut off that corner. That's going to go in the center. And we're going to measure the top piece. Now this is where we have to do a little flipping. This is where we're going to do the measurements here. So we're going to turn it over to do the measurements. And we're going to score in at 1 7/8. And from the left, once again, 1 7/8. I'm just going to double check. That's where that's going to cut from there, and it's going to cut down to the edge. So it's just a visual thing where it's easy to get lost in what you're doing. There's my 1 7/8 there. And then my 1 7/8 down here. All those crazy fractions we learned as kids. So this is the top, which is upside down. This is the top where this fold line is going to be. We're going to go from that tick mark to the one on its right. And cut that piece off and do the same thing on the other side. From the top, where the fold is, to the down piece. And we have some cute little picnic basket pieces looking. And then this will fit in up top with its border just like the others, but you see how the pattern now continues straight down with the stripes. So really it's only important if your pattern paper is directional. If you have completely non-directional paper, it doesn't matter. One lick. So let me get this glued down, and then we'll work on the front of the card. And play with this Let's Set Sail bundle that I have not played much with yet. It was going to be a class this summer, but I got busy playing with other stuff. So it's probably going to be a bundle class coming up. It's cute, especially when you see that you can do other things with that sailboat. It has a flag and looks just like a golf flag. I'm not a golfer. Okay, there we go. Continuous pattern. Yay! Okay, so this is the front of our card. This is where we're going to do the decorating. And what I did on my sample was I put the water down in Coastal Cabana. So we got to grab that stamp. Where is it here? So this is the Let's Set Sail, a couple of greetings, and the sailboat and the sails. And then this goes in the water to sort of highlight that a little bit. We're just going to use this big long water piece. Now, I'm using my block I, which I don't use too often, but if you have a Stamparatus, that works well too. Now, one thing I find when I'm using photopolymer stamps is that I want to use my foam mat underneath. It helps give a really nice pushback to it and helps with the stamping, but I don't want it to get ink all over it, so I'm going to stick some scratch paper down over top. Righty-o, let's get going on our Coastal Cabana. This is a really dark color that can go down quite dark, so I don't want to overdo it, but I do want it to start at the bottom. And the lines are there for a reason, to sort of show in the water. It's not quite wide enough to go all the way across, so I'll just double dip it. And then I went with this one a little bit higher up. So we'll re-ink. I like this fold. And we'll re-ink on the right-hand side. There we go. And we get a nice piece of really nice ocean. We also need to put some birds in the air. And there's a cute stamp for that with this set. This set's really cheap, $24. And then if you want to get the coordinating punch as a bundle, it's $45. But just by itself, the stamp set's kind of cute because you do get some birds in here. So let's get a smaller block for the birds. And you want to just look at them and see which direction. It's easy to get them upside down. I know this because I've done it. Keeping this on the mat, I don't need this anymore because my birds are not going to be stamped off onto the foam mat. All right, so we have a little ink on there. And we're going to put these guys up in the sky. And I'm actually going to put these ones a little bit more on an angle than I did the first ones. And just kind of make them look like a bigger flock. There. I like those. And then now we just need to do the sailboat and the sail. So we're going to need the early espresso, and we're going to need this stamp here. I'm just trying to get a little cleaning done. There we go. Get the birds off. Now, one thing I've learned is lately I've not been putting my stamps back in the case when I'm done with them, and then I'm going looking, and a very common place to find a lost stamp is stuck to the bottom of a stamp pad. I don't know why that is, but that's what happens to me. So, all right, so here is our sailboat, but check this out. It has a flag at the top, so doesn't that look like a golf holes flag thing that sits down? I'm using a fairly large piece of scrap because I haven't quite figured out how to get this small amount of punching in one area. I just end up wasting, and that's just the way it goes. So what I do is I get my paper and I get a sense that it's going to go this way for the least amount of waste. So I'm going to try to put my stamp down that way. It's not foolproof, but it works sometimes. Now that ended up being a little too juicy. Let's try again. All right, and we'll kind of do it this way. And there's our boat and the mast. And it dries fairly quickly, but not immediately. And then I can just kind of line it up. Look at that, I'm going to get those punched shapes out. But I'm going to do them again because I don't trust myself to be able to get those on there perfectly. So I'm going to do one in Daffodil Delight and one in Poppy Parade. Clean this stamp up, put this guy back, and then we'll work with some of the sails next. So there's this sail, and I've got another block, and then there's this sail. So these are the two sails, and then this is the piece that would go in the water to sort of highlight, you know, when the moon hits the water and you sort of see that little bit of wake, that's kind of what that does. All right, this one is going to be the red one, Poppy Parade. And how does this one come off on the punch? So it's in the bottom section. There we go. And then the Daffodil Delight one. I think one of my next chores will be trying to figure out how to use this to its most advantage without wasting so much paper. And then this one kind of comes along this way. There we go. So that's our two sails. And this ink will lighten up a little bit as it dries. So that's this guy here. I know that people make templates and then stamp into the template. That never really works for me, so I'm doing it my way. So now I want this, oh, it's upside down for what I need. Let's get my scissors out. I need this to go in this way. So I need to cut off some of the excess here. And then I can see it in the window. And ready to squish. And there we have it. There's our three pieces that we need for putting the sailboat together. And I want a little piece left over for my greeting. Alrighty. Let's build a sailboat. So I found I could use glue dots or a little bit of liquid glue on the 2 points of that sail, and that kind of holds it in place. So let me get my liquid glue out and put the big one on first. So 2 dots, one at the top and one at the bottom, and that just kind of fits there. I don't want to cover up the flag because I kind of want that to show. And then this one comes from the top and sort of overlaps the bottom one just slightly. You can play with this. If you're a sailor, well, then you know how this works. I sailed before when I was a teenager. It was sort of summer camp, but didn't take it up after that. There. That's just going to dry. All right, so while that's drying, we'll flip it over and we'll get some dimensionals so we can pop this up nicely. And I think we'll need to put a thin piece down the bottom. We'll just find a thin edge to stick down the bottom here. There we go. Got a little bit more than I need, so just cut that piece off and stick it over here. There we go. bring our card back in. Our little birds are there, and then our sailboat's going to go in the water like that. The magic is really how to do this fold, which is kind of fun. I love fun folds. What do you think about fun folds? They're kind of fancy and they give us something more to do with our 3D cards. All right, so it does want to open up. Over time it will get a little bit better. And then from my scrap here, I'm going to do Hope It's Your Best Day Ever. Oh, I want to check. I don't think that's going to fit in the punch I've chosen, though. Let's go with Adventure Awaits is what I did before. Let your dreams set sail. But I did pick out a specific punch, and I want to use that one because I like the layered look. So we will go with Adventure Awaits in Coastal Cabana. For the win. I need my mat underneath. There we go. And then we'll punch this guy out. This is the double oval punch. Super handy for having the double look. And then this one's scalloped, which is even nicer. So I've got a scrap of coordinating Poppy Parade. Let's do that. There we go. And we will just layer these guys together. Woo, a little bit longer than planned. Thanks for hanging with me. Appreciate it. There it is. Adventure Awaits. And then I'm going to add some dimensionals to pop this guy up, because that's what we do with greetings, isn't it? Get them a little bit more pizzazz. And then what I chose for a little bit of embellishment, this is a lot of color with the different colors on it, but what I chose for embellishments was the faux sea glass shapes. I thought they were kind of perfect. Now I know this is not the same color though, but it works out so well. There's some white ones and some light green ones here, and I think these are actually called Pool Party. But look at that. I mean, it just goes. It just goes perfectly. There we go. Couldn't be better for a nautical type card. And then, you know, what are you going to do on the inside? You could put a little label, or you could write on the back. But there's our Adventure Awaits card with this fancy fun fold. So thanks for watching. Appreciate you being here with me. And I will post the video and image as well as the supply list link to my blog, and you'll see that later. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.